and welcome to Work Comp Talk, a podcast dedicated to all of the injured workers in Northern California. I'm your host, Carmen Ramirez, and joining me today, I'm super excited, by the way, is not Bilal, as you can see.
Slight change.
You know, the beard can kind of come off as the same as Bilal, but Bilal's actually off this week, and we're super thankful to have David on the team today. And David is joining us as a workers' compensation attorney as well. So, you know, we always got to bring the expert in the field to kind of answer some of these dumb questions that I can essentially come up with. But Mr. David, welcome to the team. Why won't you just introduce yourself?
I'm so happy to be here. It's a pleasure. I love working with Pacific workers. I am from the Concord area. I grew up in working class neighborhoods in Martinez and Concord. Grew up around the refinery workers and people, just regular working people. And it really makes me happy that I can be here to help when things go wrong, as they inevitably do.
Yeah, unfortunately. We talk a lot about that in this podcast. And if you have yet to subscribe to our channel, make sure you do so now. And also hit the bell notification so you can get notified exactly when we drop new content. On top of that, I do want to thank our sponsors. David, you are part of that amazing team, Pacific Workers, the lawyers for injured workers serving all of Northern California. Technically all of California if they wanted to. So if you have been injured at work, if you need help, if you're stuck in the complicated web within the system of workers' compensation, you can definitely check them out at pacificworkers.com. So David, you said you've been in this area of Concord for a while. You've worked around a lot of the refinery. The typical workers we support, and this is the reason why I think Pacific Workers was built. The backbones was realizing there's a lot of hardworking class people that essentially need someone to stick up for them in the workers' comp system. How long have you been doing workers' comp for?
It's been almost 10 years now. I've been doing it since 2016.
2016.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a long time.
Yeah, and I've seen quite a few things in my time here in workers' comp.
Like, what kind of things?
Oh, I don't know if I can break confidentiality.
You don't have to say any names, but I mean an example.
So for example, I had this one really bad case where a guy, his job was to get inside those oil tanker trucks and with the hazardous materials, and it was his job to actually get inside of them and clean them. And he ended up getting this terrible lung disease. It was called beryllium poisoning, if I recall correctly.
Wow.
And that's a disease that costs something like $150,000 a month in medical treatment.
Wow.
And so we represented him. His life expectancy is much shorter now, but we did get him quite a large settlement. And getting into some of the stuff that we've talked about before, behind the scenes, is if you come to workers' comp thinking that you're going to become a millionaire, I just want to warn you, you better hope not.
Yeah, right? I love that you said it that way.
Because, that guy, his case was worth about $10 million. He had also took about 30 years off his life, and he really can't do much of anything.
Yeah, I can just assume if you have some type of infection going on in your lungs, you probably can't even walk. You can't play, you can't run, you can't.
Yeah, I mean, his lungs were essentially turning to stone.
Oof.
Yeah, they solidifying, he could not breathe. So, if you get injured at work, you're entitled to compensation, absolutely, by law. Mm-hmm. It is it's more or less a fixed system. You'll get a permanent disability rating, and we'll talk about permanent disability, but that is pegged to a certain dollar figure that's set by the state.
Right.
And then the only way to break out of that is to be in one of these catastrophic situations. And it's not the same, so you're doing a job and then you get hurt and you can't do that job anymore. that's not the same. That's not catastrophic. People think, oh, if I can't do this job anymore, it's catastrophic.
For them, obviously, it's a life-changing experience. It's catastrophic for them, especially like if you're making a certain amount of money and then you can no longer do that specific job duty, and then you have a pay cut. Bro, that's catastrophic in my life.
I'll tell you, that certainly hurts.
Yeah.
Right, but it's not going to kill you.
Yeah, no, it's not.
And you will be able to find another job doing something.
Right.
Right? Workers' comp does not take care of you for life.
I'm glad you said that. And I'm glad you brought it up because it's true. I've heard it myself, and I see it constantly also in comments. Well, the attorney's not really looking out for my best interests. I should have gotten X amount for my case. Hint, hint. Have you studied law? Have you studied the ins and outs of the workers' compensation system? The law says it all the time. You don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
So for a client to come and say, this is how much money I am entitled to, yet you're explaining right now that there is a monetary value attached to a percentage of your impairment rating, let's say your disability. There is no way in the world you're going to give them more than what the freaking the bar says, what the chart says. Impossible.
Yeah, it's set in law. It just is what it is, right? There's a couple things I want to clear up here. One thing, we've said a couple times these words, permanent disability. I want to clear up any confusion there because I have this conversation a lot with my clients. They hear the words permanent disability. They think they're laid up on the couch for the rest of their life, right? They think that this amount of money that they're going to get from workers' comp has to cover them, all their expenses, housing and food and whatever, for the rest of their lives. And that's just not what that means. Permanent disability, it's not like, state disability where you're just too disabled and the government takes care of you. It's not that at all. It really doesn't have much to do with the government at all. Okay. This is an issue of insurance companies and the law surrounding workers' compensation. Basically what happens, right, and it can get complicated, but I'm just going to give you the basics. Basically what happens is you'll go see a qualified medical examiner and
AKA QME.
A QME. Or perhaps an AME.
Right.
Sometimes we can agree on the medical examiner, but they are certified by the state to be neutral doctors. And they don't, it's not like going to the doctor and like they check you out and they try and treat you. What happens is they just check you out and just evaluate you. And the assumption is that if you injure yourself, let's say you are at work and you're lifting something and you break your back somehow. You can get surgery, you can get physical therapy, you can get all sorts of treatments, right? The assumption is that your back's never going to be the same. Now, if you were 100% healthy before that happened and your back's not going to be the same even after you've gotten this treatment, then you're not 100% anymore. So what's the difference, right? That difference between where you were before you were injured and your physical condition now is your permanent disability rating. And it's a number, it's a percentage, right? And the QME is going to check your range of motion. He's going to ask how much can you lift and carry? How long can you stand or sit or walk? And that all factors into how disabled the QME thinks you are. And he'll give you a number. We do some lawyer math around it to come up with what the actual rating is. And the reason that math exists is because some injuries are more disabling than others depending on who you are and what your job is. For example, let's say, I like to use sports because it's nice and easy.
For men.
Well, I'm not going to talk about whatever. I'm talking about because athletes are workers, right? You don't like typically think about an athlete in the same way you think about like a construction worker, but they do a job.
Yeah.
Right? So let's say a professional soccer player, right? They're running down the field, they're playing in a game, they trip and fall for whatever reason, and they break their thumb. That's a work-related injury. It happened while they were on the job, it happened in the course and in the scope of their duties, which was playing soccer. and they're entitled to compensation. The doctor's going to evaluate them. He's going to give them, their number for permanent disability. And part of what the math does that says, all right, well, how old is this person, and what type of job do they do, and what body part is injured.
Right.
Okay. If you're a soccer player, that thumb isn't going to come into play, so to speak, very much. And so,
even if you're the goalie?
Well, okay. If you're the goalie, it might. If you're the goalie, it might. Good catch. So, let's say you're I don't even know soccer.
Defense, forward, mid.
Yeah, okay. Oh, so.
Girls don't know about sports, by the way.
I don't know about sports. I know about soccer. They use their legs. They don't use that thumb.
Right.
Unless they're the goalie. So the thumb isn't going to be worth as much as, say, quarterback of a football team. Right? Quarterback of a football team's thumb is going to be worth more after we do the lawyer math for the same injury, because without that thumb, the quarterback cannot do his job.
Exactly. Okay. So what you're telling me is, again, depending on what your job is and your age, obviously that thumb is going to be a very different value for a football player than for a soccer player.
Exactly.
Because I can still kick the ball, I can still kind of do my job, even if my thumb is like wiggling and now turn into a pinky. However, if I'm a football player, that thumb it's magic. My hands are magic. So that is essentially going to take me out.
Exactly. And I hear so much from clients, oh, well, my friend had a workers' comp injury and they got this much money. How come I can only get that much money? Well, your friend probably had a different job, or they had a different QME who rated them higher than your rating is. There's a whole bunch of factors that go into what a PD rating is. And so it's different for everyone. Right.
I'm glad you brought that up. And that is true. For the most part, every person, if I know someone that probably got the same injuries like carpal tunnel. Hey, my friend got carpal tunnel and she went through workers' comp and she got, $12,000 for her carpal tunnel. Yet here I go into workers' comp with my carpal tunnel and I got $5,000. Like, what? My friend's the secretary. I am a person who doesn't really type that much. What would that be?
DoorDasher.
Yeah, I'm a DoorDasher. Sure. Like, it's completely you know what I mean? It doesn't really affect you like it affects the other person. You can't compare yourself. That is like the number one rule that a lot of lawyers say, for the most part, just because Joe got X amount doesn't mean you're going to get it. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying.
Every case is different.
That's Bilal's number one word.
Yep.
Every case is different, and every answer always ends up, well, it depends, because it truly does, right? Like, there's no way around it. It's the way the system was built. And I'm glad we're bringing up permanent disability and stuff. Go for it.
Oh, can I give you a situation in which it just doesn't depend? Because I hear this one from my clients a lot, too.
Okay.
My clients will come to me and say, well, what about the pain that I went through, right? Because, I mean, you get a work injury. It hurts. I understand. What about the pain I went through, the suffering, the emotional toll this has taken? What about my lost wages? Workers' comp doesn't cover any of that.
Bummer.
None of it.
That sucks.
And it does suck. There's a plus and a minus to it, right? Now, when you think of pain and suffering and lost wages, you're thinking about a lawsuit, which is not unreasonable. You come to a lawyer because you got hurt. It sounds like a lawsuit, right? Mm-hmm. So what's different about workers' comp? Well, if this was a lawsuit, you would have nothing paid for.
Ooh.
None of your medical care would be taken care of. You wouldn't get temporary disability payments or anything like that. And then it would be on you. You would have to pay
out of pocket
to prove that the employer had done something negligent or was at fault in some way, and only then would you get paid. Right? And that regular litigation for a regular lawsuit takes years and is very, very expensive. the upside of workers' comp, even though ultimately it's a like lower payout at the end, you do have medical care that's covered. You do have access to temporary disability payments. It's a no-fault system, so even if the employer didn't do anything wrong and you still got hurt, you're still entitled to recovery, right? You're still entitled to some kind of compensation for that injury, right? And so that's the trade-off that we make to have a work comp system separate from like a regular lawsuit.
Right.
And it really is better for people to have it that way, because if you're a working person, you know, and you miss a paycheck, like how much does that hurt, right? Like how many paychecks are you away from not being able to make rent?
Right.
Realistically, right? So having access to temporary disability payments like can keep you afloat, keep you in your house, keep food on your table, at least for a while. There is a 2-year cap on temporary disability payments, but it's better than nothing.
That is true. That is true. And, you know, needless to say, that's where the attorney comes in, because within the system, there is a lot of complexities that happen and misinformation is given, deadlines are missed, and then you're really stuck without anything. So needless to say, I'm glad you brought up the whole permanent disability, the fact that what it really does state versus what people think it is. You mentioned a very important cue for me earlier, which was it's not state. Why do clients or injured workers believe it's the same as state? Like state disability, like why would someone, I don't know, I don't get it.
I think there's two things happening there. One of them is that people think that workers' comp is like this like universal thing, right? Oh, he's out on workers' comp. Workers' comp is a type of insurance. It's like car insurance, right? So like, you know, just like how there's a bunch of different car insurance companies, there's a bunch of different workers' comp insurance companies, right? So it's not the state that's covering you for workers' comp, it's whichever insurance company your employer has, right?
Okay, gotcha.
The other thing that's confusing is there is such a thing as state disability.
There is.
Right? For people who are physically disabled or maybe developmentally disabled, that kind of thing, or for people who, for whatever reason, qualify for disability benefits through the state, they can apply for those benefits. And that has nothing to do with workers' comp. Absolutely not. You just, some of the same words get used, disability, permanent disability, but it's two different systems entirely.
They're coming from two different places. I'm glad you brought it up as in separating the two, because I do believe that it's one of the biggest misconceptions, thinking that just because you're on workers' comp, workers' compensation, whatever you want to call it, it's one system that has nothing to do with the state. However, what if you were already on state disability and then you get injured? What happens then? Like, let's say, I don't know, I used to be a person who had the ability to run or whatever. I end up getting ran over and then it changes my life. I'm now in a wheelchair. So now the state comes in and they've been helping me for the last 10 years of my life with state disability because I can't no longer do a lot of jobs or whatever, right? It's affecting my life. State's already kicked in. And then I happen to have an accident at work. Can you like morph the two? Like, what would my options be?
I gotta be honest, I can't think of a situation where you would be on state disability and be working.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, even if it's those volunteer jobs where you kind of just go do like random little things, you know, and shit happens. The only reason I know is because I used to have a neighbor. Hi, neighbor.
Okay.
So he got ran over, actually. He was a typical normal person. Then he was on state disability after he got ran over. And then he would often get onto these little jobs where it was kind of like keeping him busy to do something. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he wasn't even legit working. It was just something that a community was probably giving him to keep busy in.
Oh, maybe he was like just doing like little odd jobs on the side?
I don't think maybe on the side, but little programs that help people that have disabilities, that makes them feel included in some way. I don't know.
That doesn't actually sound like employment.
Oh.
So to be eligible for workers' comp, you need to be an employee.
Right.
Right. So like a couple of years ago, this big debate between, not between, but like it was on the ballot. Are Lyft and Uber drivers employees?
Right.
Right.
Oh, I remember that one.
Lyft and Uber was trying to say, oh, no, you're all independent contractors. And why do they want to do that? Because they didn't want to pay for workers' comp insurance. And they didn't want to be responsible for all the Lyft and Uber drivers, being out there. They could get injured. They could injure someone else. Who knows? If they're employees, then Lyft and Uber are on the hook. The flip side of that is that when a Lyft or Uber driver got in a car accident or something happened to them on the job, some crazy person attacks them from the back seat or something, the Lyft and Uber drivers really didn't have any recourse, right? So that's just to illustrate, like, if you're not an employee, like a regular employee, you're not eligible for workers' comp. It's important to know that there is a legal definition of what is an employee versus an independent contractor. And so like, it doesn't really matter so much. I mean, it certainly helps if you have like an employment contract or, something that like makes it really crystal clear.
Like legit. Yeah.
Yeah. That you're an employee, right? But if your employer is telling you where and when to be and directing you how to do your work and supplying you with the tools and materials you need to do your work, I don't care if they're calling you an independent contractor. You're an employee. Okay.
Hey, by the way, wear our shirts too. Wear our uniform, but you're still a contractor.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But yeah, I mean, that's the legal definition. Sometimes you have to go to trial over that because the insurance companies will do anything to not pay, right? And so sometimes if there's a way for them to make an argument that you're not a real employee, well, then we have to go to trial and prove that you were.
What is the craziest story you've heard an insurance company say when they're not trying to be liable for someone's injury? As an attorney, I'm pretty sure you have heard the craziest things from the insurance companies.
Actually, I think the craziest one, maybe the worst story, it's actually not the insurance company. It was the employer.
Dun, 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 dun.
So my guy had been working for a landscape company for about 15 years, something like that. His employer didn't give him any kind of safety equipment or, you're working at a landscape company. You think the guy would have gloves,
at least,
right?
Yeah.
If you're going to give a guy a chainsaw, maybe give him some goggles too, right? For whatever reason, this guy was ordered, whatever, to take a chainsaw to, what's that called? The duct in the, around the roof. What's it called?
Oh yeah, the ducts. Yeah, where the
gutters.
The gutters. I was like, they say it all the time. Clean your gutters. I lost the word.
So yeah, I guess a gutter needed to be replaced or whatever, and the guy was told to do it. So he takes this chainsaw to the gutter, and a piece of metal flies into his eye.
Oh man!
And the guy, he's bleeding from his eye. He goes to the doctor. They do what they can to deal with it. Ultimately, he loses the eye.
Oh no!
He loses the eye. I take his case. In response to the case, the insurance company came back to me and said, this guy was never employed with this employer. Came back and told me we never heard of this guy.
Oh my gosh.
None of that stuff. There's a couple of things about this case. One of the reasons they were able to say that was because the injured worker in question was not in the country legally. Now, I don't care if you're in the country legally or illegally. If you work in California workers' compensation law applies to you. Okay? You have all the rights that everyone else has if you're working in this state. Okay?
Thank God.
Let me make that abundantly clear. Okay? And also, workers' comp court is not immigration court. If you are here illegally, don't be afraid to assert your rights. All right? No one's going to come and check your legal status or any of that. There's no reason to be afraid. Okay? But they did use that because he didn't have any papers, he didn't have a contract. The other thing that this employer was doing, that in this case helped the insurance company, was he was paying this worker in cash under the table.
So there was like no record.
No record. Not only no record, but hey, guess what? If you're paying your employees cash under the table, you're not paying payroll taxes.
Yep.
This was a very, very naughty employer. Not paying payroll taxes is a crime.
Yeah.
Employing people without workers' comp insurance is a crime. People talk about work comp fraud. The insurance companies love to accuse people of work comp fraud, right? But guess what? It's not the workers doing it. Every instance I've ever seen of workers' compensation fraud has been done by employers.
The employers. They try to hide it.
They try to hide their stuff, and it saves the money. I get it, but it's not legal. So what did I do for this guy? I mean, I had all this evidence stacking up against me, right? Well, first of all, I had the lack of evidence that he was employed because I didn't have any kind of contract or any kind of anything. I didn't have any pay stubs to work from. The only thing I had to prove that my client worked for this employer.
Please say that house had cameras.
Well, I had a picture of him standing with another employee in a similar situation.
Okay.
In front of a company truck with the logo on it.
Okay.
And they're obviously dressed for work. And I remember I was talking to the defense attorney about it. Defense attorneys, I mean, look, they work for insurance companies. Insurance companies are evil, for lack of a better word. But defense attorneys themselves are like just doing a job. They're decent people. And so I was talking to this guy who really thought like, hey, he didn't really believe that my client had worked for this company. And when I showed him this picture, he goes, oh, the employer's lying to us.
Oh. And
then he got on my side.
Of course.
Right?
Because, they have more to lose if they wouldn't have.
Well, the thing is, an employer is subject to a lot of fines and penalties. And if it's an individual, even prison time for breaking these laws.
Interesting.
Right?
Hint, hint, guys, pay attention.
Yeah, follow the labor laws, employers.
That is insane. The amount of stories that, I ask Bilal all the time, like, hey, give an example. And I pick at him because sometimes if you hear what really is happening out there, it makes it more real, right? And that's something we do a lot in this podcast. We share stories. Obviously, we don't like to share names and such for purposes, privacy purposes, but it's important to know things like this do happen. They happen all the time. And Bilal always does it. You don't know what you don't know. You might imagine and tell yourself, that's what they're saying. The internet comes up with all this shit. Like, no, it is legit.
And here's another thing, right? If this is just good general advice, speaking as a lawyer, if anyone ever says you don't need a lawyer, you need a lawyer. The first thing you should do as soon as you hear someone say you don't need a lawyer is go get a lawyer.
Yeah, we are going to wrap this one up for now. If you guys have any comments, questions, you guys can also leave some comments for David at the bottom. We are going to bring another series of Ask Bilal questions coming soon to you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to just reach out. And this is something we always say, even if you think it's a dumb question, there are never any dumb questions.
There's no dumb questions.
There's only valid questions. Everything goes. And we wish you guys the best, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thanks for watching.